needed to hear some of the things that he was saying. Was the hyperbole necessary? I think for some people at that time, it definitely was. And especially when we get into the topics like, men are 5 or 6 times more likely to commit suicide once they've been divorced or they've been zeroed out.
More than that. Yeah.
And he's trying to stop that from happening. That's why I think the book is important. But the idea that like there's a clear definition of hypergamy. Hypergamy is not a psychological term; it's a sociological term. It's really difficult to say that, and that for them to say that's his opinion, that's fine. The other thing I'll say about Rollo is he changes his opinion on certain things. So remember, this is 2013. This is 10 years ago. Rollo has changed. He's written 5 books since then, and he's done a podcast with me. Rollo has softened on the idea of men and women having friends. I have tons of female friends. I run an entire business off teaching men how to have female friends. So he's changed his, and just to let you know, like he's friends with Icy, one of the girls who works over at, shout out to Icy if she's watching from Fresh and Fit podcast. The sweetest girl in the world. Some of us can be friends. We change over time because that is the scientific method. We have a hypothesis, and over time we introduce information that changes our hypothesis. But overall, like, so here's the thing: like when Rollo and I agree with everything in his book, but do I agree with it in every instance? No, number one. And number two, Rollo doesn't talk much about like things that I'm into, like logistics or pre-selection or something like that. He doesn't talk about that as much. It doesn't mean that the book is like, the problem is if you use the book for everything, you can just hold it to him all the time. But I can do the same thing with the Old Testament and the Bible. Yeah. You can't do that. Like it is a free form. It's changing over time. And so overall, I think what he did, especially for me, specifically for me, was so incredibly helpful. I think that the book is important, and I do recommend it for men to at least listen. I'll read anything. I've read Mein Kampf. I'll read anything. I think
this is also coming from somebody who is already in a phase of life where you obviously read multiple books.
Yeah, but I read this in 2013. I was in a different place. I was a captain. I was a captain in the U.S. Air Force back then. So
that was like one of the books that like started your trajectory. And
it gave a face and a name to something that I had not had a face or a name for. So, but the problem, here's the ultimate problem. Let's just say hypergamy is somewhere in the middle of the average of the things that we're describing. The reality is, are some men using this to call women bad? Yes, but Rollo isn't one of them. Rollo is not saying they're bad. Rollo is saying that if you do not maintain a certain level of looks, money, status, or money, muscles, game, that your wife is going to just start looking in other directions. Does that mean other penises are going to go inside of her? No. That depends on the situation she's in and the stimulus that she receives. That does not mean 100% of the time. And I know it may come off like that. Now, when you get into the Reddit forums, it's 100% of the time. You're not, the taller guy moved in next door, she's fucking him, blah, because these guys watch too much porn, whatever. In those cases.
They're the vocal minority.
Again, I apologize to Ruslan's audience. I didn't mean to cuss. But
you're good. They're big boys.
It's so frustrating, especially when we make content too, because I talk about it all the time. Most women are not hoeing out.
Right. Yeah. She just. I didn't know that there was somebody saying that.
I agree with this. Rollo agrees with me. The thing about the praxeology is we were always saying, it's in pencil, it's not in ink. You can always change and add. It's like as long as there's stuff to support it.
Sure.
I think that's important in a modern age. Sure. Maybe not with like the Bible. I don't know.
I definitely think the discussion is important, but what I'm seeing is somebody who not only works with, millennials, but also youth and young people. Like they don't delineate hyperbole. They're not thinking about
it is
whether
problematic.
or not.
Actually, when you're younger and you're filled with testosterone, there's very little nuance.
Like, I'm hearing the same vocals, but like it
can be dangerous. But I think misogynistic men were misogynistic and then came to Red Pill. I don't think Red Pill made them that way. Do I think that they put themselves into echo chambers? Yes. But Black Pill is not like MGTOW, incels, and Black Pill. That's not Rollo's shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, that wasn't my claim.
But if they are toxic, then that's the whole situation.
And also when it comes to Red Pill, like we've actually had conversations with Red Pill community multiple times, and most of it's been just us discussing that these are great conversations.
Of course.
We just hate the results of what the men tend
because
to do
because they're
with
hurt.
The information.
Because they're hurt. Because the reality of the situation is
a lot of men are hurt.
If you guys are even in the upper middle class, like the fact of the matter is when we have women come on the show and we ask them what's the average man in the United States make, their answers are always 100K. Sure. Men are average 6'1" and make 100K. No, the average man is 5'9" and he makes $36,000 a year. And women, they're
half of them are overweight.
Men lie to women about that stuff.
But why would they lie to them?
Because
they lie to women?
Because of hypergamy. That's why they lie about it.
When they want to get a woman, they'll say, "Oh, maybe I'm 6 feet tall." I've checked
your on a dating profile
in person, and I will check their ID, and it will be 5'10". So guys are lying, girls are confused.
Yeah.
They're regurgitating. Women are NPCs. Like, just to be honest, they regurgitate this stuff. You look at who they're dating, totally opposite.
But then again, if you play sports in high school, like they actually give you 2 inches. You know what I'm saying?
Because your shoes. Because I got them new Jordans. It's 2 inches.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's. When you see women say this stuff, there's obviously women that say this stuff. We see it on Kevin Samuels. We see it on Freshman.
Yeah.
I think the tough part is how much of this is selection biased in terms of the type of woman that would even come on a podcast, have drinks, and say this goofy stuff, and how much of this is most women.
I get your point now. What you're talking about is the selection bias for who comes on the show.
Yes.
By the way,
and then that's tainting.
Shout out to Access Vegas, our show. We do it once every 2 weeks specifically for that reason. I choose girls a month out, and I always, if I have a girl who does adult work, a girl across her has to have a master's degree. I always do the girl with no Instagram versus the girl who has 2 million followers, because I want to represent. Now they all happen to be very, very attractive, so that does skew the representation.
And they all say the same thing.
Yeah, they do say the same thing.
Like,
that's the point of Access Vegas. Access Vegas was to show, because by the way, do not for any reason blame Fresh and Fit for this, because they're doing a show 3 times. If I had to get 9 girls to come onto a show 3 times a week, that would be hard. They would be way less attractive than what they got.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. I'm saying the type of women that come on and say these things,
for sure,
in my opinion, are probably not representative of most women.
Yeah,
I'll give you a perfect example, because I only bring on single women on my show. So I can prove that single women are a certain type. Like you could see that they are all a certain type. I asked them, when was their last relationship? 2 years ago. You know, like all these girls are like kind of stuck single. And so like, but my recruiters try to get, it's like what they were saying about Fresh Fit. We try to get as many people as we can. And like, we don't have a choice. Like there's no choice for us, but you can tell that girls that are stuck single have a certain type of mentality, have a certain way that they think. And that's why they're single.
Yeah. And I would say yes and amen. And I would add, if they're in college, if they're at a specific type of college, right? That's a very specific type of girl, whereas like you broaden your horizons, you go to different parts, you go to parts where women are raised with their father in the home. And they have a great bond with their dad. They have sisters. They're in church. They're doing things that are different than the girl who's 21. Yeah, I'm joining a sorority.
A lot of them just moved to Texas too. A lot of them just moved to Dallas. They don't know anybody.
So here's the issue though. While what you're saying is true, while they are different, the difference tend to be based on genetics more so than whether or not they joined a sorority. Because one of the things that there's,
you don't think it's environment too, though?
So here's the thing. There's studies that do this. They take monozygotic twins and they put them in 2 different environments. They don't obviously. There's morally you cannot do this. They happen to be they happen to be adopted by 2 different families. And if one of them becomes a sociopath, the other one tends to become a sociopath.
Got it.
So things like that. They tend to date the same kind of men and things like that. So most of it is based on genetics.
Got it.
So there are I know one girl, she grew up in the church, like very religious father, and she became a porn star. I know one girl who grew up a broken family completely.
You're saying it's more nature than nurture.
But it is more nature than nurture. And in general, do those things affect you? Yes, your peer. So I was reading somewhere, it is more than 50% genetics, and then a small, like 30-something% has to do with peer group, and then 7 or 8% is parenting.
Say that one more time. You said what percentage is
so when it comes with to someone's personality, if somebody could look this up and like post a study,
I know what you're talking
but it's over 50% has to do with genetics, and then like something less than 30% has to do with the peer group. It's like 24, and then 7 or 8% has to do with parenting. And people are like, that's crazy. But when you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, there were several instances where kids were growing up without parents. Human beings have two eyes, 2 ears, 2 hemispheres of the brains, 2 hands. We're a redundant species that's created to be damaged or go through some level of trauma and still continue to survive. Growing up without parents, like Steve Jobs, for instance, his parents gave him up. If you, by the way, here's another thing. Steve Jobs met his parents. Guess what? They both had PhDs. Like that, intelligence is heritable. So one of these situations is losing these situations or going like a great example is Zion Clark. Do you know who he is? Guy who no legs, won an MMA fight a couple weeks ago. Guy has no legs. He was born with no legs. He won an MMA fight. His arms are huge. He fights in 105 and his arms are gigantic. And he swings up, just pops these guys in the head, and he gets a hold of you. You can't get out.
That's amazing.
Zion Clark. You should look him up.
This just happened. Like
just look at it. It's incredible. The guy's an incredible athlete. He's coming on my show. Anyway. Yeah, he won his first MMA fight, right? So the situation with him is that he was abused regularly, starved in the process of going through the orphanage. I'm trying to think the child care process in San Diego, but grew up to be this incredibly powerful human being. Yeah. So humans are built to be redundant, but whether or not he was redundant or redundant, whether or not he was resilient, I think has mostly to do with genetics. And so that's one of the things. Evolutionary psychology is all about statistics in general. It's not 100% of women say that they're less happy in a marriage. It's 83%. If I say there's an 80% chance that it's going to rain tomorrow and it doesn't rain, that doesn't mean I was wrong. That's how statistics work. Yep. But what happens is for young men who are very frustrated, who are jerking off, watching porn, watching anime, and have been rejected by a woman, everything becomes black and white, right? Anime. And this is what happens. and this is where it becomes very, very difficult. So the guys that are out there that are saying the hateful shit, Rollo and Rich Cooper don't want to hang out with you. They don't like you either. That's the problem. Because Rich Cooper calls it the mana swamp. The problems that you're attributing are correct problems, but it's not anyone. I don't think it's anyone in red pills specifically their fault. What I think it is that this, just like I said, you have sociopaths or selected for it to be cartel leaders. In the manosphere, it selects for, hey, I push this button and do this thing and then I get sex with women. So it selects for sociopaths. Does that make sense?
I got you.
So we're going to have a higher degree of sociopath. Just so, like if you guys have ever lived in Miami, you're going to meet more narcissists per capita if you live in Miami than if you live in Secaucus, New Jersey. And I think that's part of the reason why. So